Someone Better by I_am_Ellie on AO3. Episode 7, Chapter 6, Stay Awake. After the funeral, Hizashi and Shouta both applied for day jobs, Shouta signing up for night shifts as well. It was exhausting, and it barely left them enough time to tuck Izuku in before they had to run to patrol. But what had to be done, had to be done. Hizashi seemed to take the extra work a lot better than Shouta did. Shouta had signed up for day shifts because he needed all the sleep he could get. But now that he had a side job, he had to transfer his 4-hour-long shift to almost immediately after he came back from his day job. That he just barely had time to change into night clothes. Thanks, Nemuri. And get a few hours of sleep before running back to the restaurant, where he now worked as a waitress. It was the same with Hizashi. Work, sleep, and patrol. It left him frazzled and irritated. After only a week of trying to pay the money back for the bank, who only seemed to pile on more and more ridiculous amounts of interest the longer it went unpaid, it felt like he didn't have the energy to do anything anymore. Even tucking Izuku in at night felt like a momentable task. Sometimes it made him wonder why he still did it. Then he looks at Izuku and he remembers. Izuku tried to help in any way he could, in his own way. When Shota's legs hurt from being on his feet all day, he would hug him and ask him to feel better soon. When he was simply too exhausted to sleep, Izuku seemed to be able to sense it and would give Shouta one of his stuffed toys just before he left for bed. When Hisashi's head hurt, Izuku would bring him bottles of water, and when he seemed to be in a bad mood, Izuku would try and tell him funny stories to get him to smile. The stories were rarely funny, at least by adult standards, but something about watching the little boy gesture animatedly while he talked was amusing. Overall, Shouta didn't regret taking on that extra job to pay off his debt, not when it was for Izuku. He only wished it hadn't cost him so much energy, and not having enough energy was a very dangerous thing for patrol. His goggles were one of his favorite possessions, both because of who had given them to him and because of their dual purpose. They helped him use his quirk without others knowing who he was using it on, and they helped with visual input, and went a long way to keep him from getting overwhelmed. Their only real downside was that they slightly inhibited his peripheral vision, which is why, when he was fighting a group of villains in a warehouse after busting them for illegal distribution, he didn't see the flying pole his way until it hit him right in the knee. He felt the knee jerk backwards, and then a loud crunch. The villains, who he'd done a good job at keeping at bay until now, slowly rose back from their feet once they saw that they habilitated him. Shouta activated his quirk on the nearest one as he walked closer, trying not to look down at his surely broken leg. The shock and adrenaline was keeping him from feeling the pain, but he knew, as soon as he looked at it, it would be unbearable. The one who walked closer to him seemed to be the one that had thrown the pole at his leg. He seemed to have a strength quirk, large muscles ripping under his skin of his arms, with shaved hair and a thick head. Even with his quirk cancelled, with the amount of physical training the man had obviously done, he would probably be able to administer grave injuries. Shouta felt his anxiety spike. His hands were covered by a stretch of his capture weapon. He slowly reached towards his watch, pushing a button, sending a distress call to any heroes in the area. His hands gripped his capture weapon. Distantly, he remembered kicking the man in the face near the beginning of the fight. There was still blood caked under his nose, down his chin. Now he looked like he was after Shouta's blood. Behind the man with the strength quirk were the other 3 villains, one with wing bats, another with tube fused to the side of her face, and an acid quirk. The last had scales running up down his body, shimmering and changing colors every few seconds. Carmelian. It should have been a fairly easy fight, if not for his damaged leg, if not for his reflexes muddled by exhaustion. The best course of action would be to try and escape, but Shouta wasn't sure how with the strength villain so close. The ceiling was too high for his capture weapon to wrap around a support beam. He couldn't run, not with his leg which was bending the wrong way. Should have felt an ache spark up from his knee. The other three villains, hiding behind the strength villain, were laughing. Shota's ears buzzed with the noise. His watch beeped, quietly, a response to his distress call. He could wait it out. He just had to hope the strength villain didn't kill him before then. The strength villain glanced at his leg, turning. Shota did not look. He would not look. He would not look at the leg. He could not look at the leg. The strength villain picked up the pole, lying near him, and tossed it aside. He lifted his foot, easing it down on his knee slowly. Shota gasped in the pain as the pressure slowly increased. Not even adrenaline could keep him from feeling that. So fragile for a hero, the man said. So easy to break. Shota tried to keep his quirk activated. If the villain tried to use his quirk on him, on his leg, it was a goner. The villain picked up the pole again, never easing the pressure, and looked at it. It was hollow, but it was heavy, made of metal. The villain squeezed it, and it gave under his hand, making finger-like indents. I could crush your skull like this, with or without my quirk, the villain said. Crush it as easily as a soda can. He held up the pole with both hands and bent it almost in half. And I could break every one of your limbs as easy as twigs. He unbent the pole, twisted it. I could rip them off and throw them away, and no one would be able to save you. Even the other villains behind him looked surprised. Shota wouldn't blink. He would not blink. He could not blink. The villain was waiting for him to blink. His foot pressed back down again, and Shota felt something pop, then something wet pulling under the limb. He pressed the distress call again, 2 beeps back. If they were coming, then where were they? They couldn't be far. Or, the villain continued, I could get Mariki, get her to spit acid at you, get her to melt off every inch of your skin. He lifted his foot. But I don't think I will. He couldn't blink. I think I'll just leave you right here. He brought the foot down, crashing back onto his leg, and Shota felt something in his leg rip. To bleed out, or die from infection. Whichever comes first. The other 3 villains stared at his leg in fear and disgust. The one with the wings looked like he was about to throw up. Sadistic. Very, very sadistic. Should have felt like he might throw up too. The villain with the strength quirk shoved money at the villain with wings. He took it, never once looking away from Shota's leg. Shota wasn't sure if it was because of the morbid fascination or because he simply couldn't look away. He wondered how bad it really was. Don't blink. The strength villain marched out of the warehouse. Acid and Charmeleon followed him numbly. Wings shuddered before flying out of the warehouse window. Shota let out a breath and blinked. He had been holding himself up before, but now he collapsed backwards. The warehouse floor was cold concrete, but Shota could feel a warmth liquid under his back, creeping upwards, wetting his hair. Shota couldn't help it. He had to treat the wound. The world was already growing fuzzy around the edges. He looked back down at his leg, and he almost threw up. He couldn't tell much because of the black fabric of his tracksuit, but the giant pool of crimson blood under him spoke volumes. He held in a breath, closed his eyes, and his mind went numb as he felt along his utility belt, taking out a small knife. He didn't like knives. He wasn't good with them, but it was useful in this case. He cut the fabric of his pants legs, ripping it off and throwing the silk fabric aside. He couldn't even see the color of his skin. It was all covered by deep red blood. A jagged white piece of bone stuck out of the skin. and the wound pumped out great globs of blood as it did. His knee was squashed, and he couldn't bend it. Couldn't move his leg at all, really. He took his capture weapon and rolled up more of his tracksuit, tying it up at his upper thigh, as tight as his cold hands could get. He tried not to cry out as his leg gave a sharp stabbing of pain as the gray material digged under his skin. His skin was buzzing. His ears rang. He looked at his bracelet. 3 heroes had pinged it, saying they were coming to the scene. Midnight, who was supposed to be watching Izuku, what the hell? Present Mike. Why him? Why does he have to see him like this? Why? And a hero who had just applied for their agency, Lad King. At least heroes were coming. He just had to stay awake. He couldn't move. He couldn't walk. But he could stay awake. He had to, anyways, so he could just adjust the tourniquet. He hoped Midnight hadn't left Izuku home alone. He pushed his goggles up, and they got his bangs out of his face. He stared up at the ceiling, at the cobwebs of intersecting support beams. How long would the healing process be? Not long, surely. He'd find someone with a good healing quirk. Might even send a letter to Recovery Girl. The old woman was fond of him. Well, fond of Hizashi. She could help. His heart started beating rapidly, and his hands started shaking as the numbness in his brain melted away slightly. His fists clenched slightly. The warehouse had hanging lights blaring overhead, and they were too bright. The sound of his own breathing was too sharp, too loud. His leg ached too much. Too much! The remaining numbness of his brain scared him, and his chest hurt. The smell of blood was overbearing, moist, and coppery, and it made Shouta want to vomit. A headache reared its ugly head. His arms were heavy as he laid there, heart trying to beat out of his own chest. Stay awake. His eyelids felt weighted down, forcing them back open to struggle. Stay awake. The pain was almost unbearable, and he felt like he could pass out from it alone, even though his mind was still a little cloudy and numb. Stay awake. His hands were growing cold. Stay awake. Shouta wondered if this is how he would die. Stay awake. He heard a loud bang, and then 3 familiar faces were staring over him. He felt someone grab his hand. Shouta was glad. They were so cold. Stay awake! Shouta couldn't stay awake. Shouta came back in a hospital bed. There was a steady beeping next to him, and he felt odd and floaty. His hands were still cold, but someone was holding one of them, and it made him feel better. It took him a while to open his eyes. Hizashi was sitting beside him, looking exhausted and run down. There were black circles under his green eyes, and Shouta could see them even through his glasses. Izuku was curled up on a chair on the other side of his bed, wrapped in a blue blanket, green head of curls, peeking out. Hizashi, he murmured. Hizashi looked up, and his shoulders seemed to slump in on themselves in relief. Oh, thank goodness, he said. Good God, Sho, never do that again, oh God. What? He looked down at the extent of the hospital bed. Hospital gown, IV, pads on his chest monitoring his heartbeat. Further down, a large cast covering his leg. Memories came rushing back, whether he wanted them or not. Oh. Yeah, oh. Hizashi shook his head. You almost died. Feels like I did. Shouta grumbled. No, you don't understand. You almost bled out. The doctor said something about an artery behind your knee being damaged when it was crushed, and they had to do a blood transfusion. You nearly died. How long have I been asleep? 12 hours. You've been in and out, but I doubt you remember. This is the most lucid we've seen you. Shouta nodded. Is the child okay? Is the child? Yes, the kid's okay. Why wouldn't the kid be okay? You should be worried about your leg. You won't be able to walk for weeks after this show. But the debt. What about Inko's funeral bills? How are we supposed to pay them with me laid up? Can't they just get someone with a healing quirk in here? Shouta, that bastard shattered your knee. He snapped the bone in your leg in half. It was in so many pieces they had to take you back for surgery to rebuild your knee. They said they can't heal it that fast, or there would be damage. You'll just have to naturally heal for a few weeks, maybe a couple months, and then they'll heal you the rest of the way. Did the agency fire me? Shouta asked, numbly. Shouta sighed. No, Hizashi said. No, I don't think so. But you're out of the field for however long you're hurt. And they're required 2 weeks of physical therapy afterwards. You'll still get paid. But they're putting you on temporary disability. But it probably won't be enough. Shouta finished. Yeah. And the restaurant? Can't wait tables with one good leg show. Hizashi said. They let you go. For the time being. I'm sorry, babe. Shouta nodded. How is this going to affect my work? He asked instead. Any physical problems after it's healed? The doctors aren't sure yet. Hizashi said. Might have some chronic pain. You'll probably have to go easier on your shifts at first. They'll probably prescribe you some pain medication. And yeah, physical therapy to strengthen your leg again. It's, gonna be a bit of a process. Shouta sighed. He was right. What? Who was right? I should have gotten insurance. That was part 1 of chapter 6. The rest part of chapter 6 will be coming tomorrow, but I want to talk. I kind of forgot that Shouta had a bad knee after this. I kind of forgot that this incident happened, to be honest. I don't know why I forgot. It's such a big thing. It's, it actually sends them spiraling, so I don't know how I managed to forget this. This was such a big thing, but okay. I guess I forgot it. I don't have much notes, actually. Just, I forgot that this happened. I also think that it's probably really traumatizing for Hizashi to walk in on his husband, who is lying there, half unconscious, half conscious, basically, on the brink of about to pass out from literally pain and, blood, lost, to then be told by the doctors that your, significant other, your boyfriend, almost died. Yeah, no. Yeah, that's, I don't know what I would do. Hizashi, I don't know. If we lived in a quirked world, and I had to live, and, I am dating a hero, I don't know if I would be able to put up with that type of pain. I'd date a villain, though. Oh, I'd definitely date a villain. Oh, hell yeah, I'd date a villain. God, if we're talking about it fictionally, I'd date a villain. Don't look at me like that. Don't look at me like that. Y'all would date a villain, too. I know you. I'd be seeing all you. I know y'all. You would, too. Anyways, as always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.